The job of the Election Commission in India is to conduct free and fair elections. But is the selection of the Election Commissioner free and fair? It's a crucial question that the Supreme Court has raised. A 5-judge bench is hearing a petition that is asking for reform in the way the Election Commission members are appointed, all 3 of them. There are 2 election commissioners and 1 chief election commissioner. That's what makes up the Election Commission in India. Now, today, during the hearing, the court has asked some very serious questions, like what is the chief election commissioner has to take on the Prime Minister? If they have to go against the Prime Minister, can they do it? They are asking essentially whether the Election Commission is insulated from political influence. So what is the case and why have the questions cropped up? Now, the petition to reform how the Election Commission is staffed was filed in January 2015. In 2018, a 2-judge bench referred the case to a 5-judge constitution bench that has now started hearing the case. The key question being asked is if the Election Commission is essentially selected by the government of the day, will they truly act independently? In a nutshell, that is the issue at hand. Now, among its observations, the court has noted that no chief election commissioner has completed their full tenure of 6 years since at least 2007. Our research shows that's probably gone back as far as 1996. Take a look at some of the important observations by the top court during this hearing. And of course, this hearing continues. Today was day 2. They've said we need a CEC, that's a Chief Election Commissioner, who can even take action against a Prime Minister. They've asked to produce files if there is no hanky-panky. And here, they're speaking of the nomination of Mr. Arun Goel as Election Commissioner as early as Monday. They're saying this is recent. Show us the documents of why you selected or elected this particular individual. And if there's no hanky-panky, there should be no issue in showing us this document. Every government appoints a yes man as CEC. That's the observation of the court. And it's perhaps a very, very damning one, an important one. They go on to say that the CEC, that's the Chief Election Commission, should not allow themselves to be bulldozed. And they go back to TN session. They say a TN session happens once in a while. If a CEC is weak, the system breaks down. So why the questions over the Election Commission? The EC, that's the Election Commission of India, is tasked with protecting the largest democracy in the world. And any question on their impartiality is a dangerous one. Unfortunately, there has been no shortage of questions recently. For one, why has no CEC completed their term? I said that since 1996, as far back as we can see from the Election Commission website, no CEC has completed a term of 6 years. The condition is they work for at least 6 years or till they reach the age of 65. The tenure is so short in all cases that real reform is not possible. There's been actually one CEC who had the term only for 4 months. The way an election commissioner is appointed is also coming under question. So far the process is that a recommendation is made by the cabinet of the day and that recommendation is made to the president. The president then makes the appointment. There is no clarity on what a certain individual is selected from among the bureaucracy. Opposition parties have long been complaining of partisan behavior by the EC, and this has been going on through successive governments. You've seen it in the recent announcement of dates of the Gujarat elections, of the MCD elections, and it's been happening through time, even when there was a Congress government at the center. So the question, is it time to change the system? To speak on this, I'm joined first by Dr. S.Y. Quraishi, former Chief Election Commissioner, joining me this evening on the show. Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocate in the Supreme Court, is speaking with me. Colin Gonsalves, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, also joining us. I'm speaking with Advocate Namit Saxena and author Karan Verma today. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us on the show. Dr. Quraishi, let me begin with your take on, what the Supreme Court is saying. It's actually lifted the lid and forced us to talk about a very, very sensitive issue, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. But I think what Supreme Court is doing is not a surprise. We have been demanding it for the last 20-25 years. The Law Commission has suggested it. As CEC, I wrote to the government my predecessor CEC wrote to the government, although we were beneficiaries of the same system of appointment by the government of the day, but we were not happy because we said we will feel happier if there is a wider consultation and leader of opposition is also signatory to our appointment, because that will be a proof that we have a wider acceptance. So it is a miracle that despite this weakness that we have, this most powerful commission, election commission in the world, has the weakest system of appointment, and we have been wanting to improve it. And I'm glad that Supreme Court has finally taken notice of it, and hopefully at least a collegium system will be introduced, as we have 2-3 other cases already for CBC, CIC, and even Director
Dr.
CBI.
Dr. Quraishi, you know, the thing is that these allegations against the election commission or the chief election commissioner or the whole system not being fair or behaving in a partisan fashion have happened again and again over time. And, you know, the opposition parties usually are the ones making the allegation. I want to understand from you whether there is a situation where this office is feeling bulldozed. The Supreme Court talks about it being bulldozed because it's a selection at the end of the day. The cabinet of the government of the day is choosing who sits in that chair.
Yeah. You know, it's a question which is difficult for me to answer because it has a political overtone. But the fact that there was the election commissioner, Ashok Lavasa, who was dissatisfied with the way the things were working in the election commission, is the proof that all was not well. At the same time, there have been CECs appointed by the government of the day and who have acted against the government of the day, have acted against the Prime Minister. One CEC even declared the election of the Prime Minister null and void. That has been the case. I was appointed by the government of the same party. My two colleagues were also appointed by the same government, same political party, but we took action against the law minister of the land, who is the head of the administrative ministry of our the institution. We censured him and we took action against 2-3 other ministers, because once appointed, we have the protection of the constitution, and it is expected, the nation expects us to be free, fair and neutral, and most of us have delivered it.
Most have delivered it, have some not. How will you tell? Will there be a question? Are these questions valid? Sanjay, let me bring you into the discussion, because what the Supreme Court is looking at today is something that people may have been thinking but have not really articulated. Today it's out all in the open, Mr. Hegde, that can someone in the position appointed by the government of the day potentially act against that same government or that same political party if they need to?
As a matter of history, I did represent Mr. T.N. Seshan, and I was part of the team of Mr. G. Ramaswamy when Mr. Seshan was thought to be overshadowed by making 2 other appointments. So if Mr. Seshan had been alive, he would have possibly chuckled in a kind of posthumous vindication of his position. There used to be only one chief election commissioner, and that's how the early years of the Republic went by. Mr. Sukumar said the first election commissioner got a superb election going in 1952. To cater to a largely illiterate populace, he created election symbols and put in a mechanism which has brought a miracle of democracy working all these years. But there have been continuous assaults on the system, some of it by the governments of the day, some of it by politicians who were in the opposition and later became part of the government. And there have been occasional election commissioners also who have not done the job any good by subsequently joining the government and becoming ministers. Election commissioners are supposed to be like neutral umpires. And their appointment, even though it is by the government, to a certain extent, people in the system know what the officer concerned is. Even Mr. T.N. Seshan's own appointment, I believe that the then Home Minister of the day, Mr. Bhutta Singh, had his own reservations. But despite that, it went through it. And then there was a particular phase when he, as Mr. Quraishi he told you, that when the elections in Patna, Lok Sabha constituency, were being sought to be subverted by booth capturing, notwithstanding the fact that it was I.K. Gujral, Prime Minister of the day, who was the candidate from that seat, the elections were countermanded. So that kind of independence was not countenanced by the political masters at that point of time. In fact, Mr. Ramaswamy, while arguing in the matter,
Right.
said that the power of fixation of chief election, of a number of election commissioners was used to pander to the government's fixation. So after the fixation, there has never been another session. With due respect to Mr. Quraishi.
That is, even the court has talked about Mr. Session. Let's talk about the current day. Let's talk about the current day, because what is happening is, look at the context right now. There have been a slew of allegations by opposition parties today saying that the Election Commission is not acting fairly when they decide election dates, for example, on the actions they take on complaints, for example. And this is coming at a time when the Supreme Court is saying that no one should be bulldozed.
Also with regard to hate speech and politically incendiary rhetoric, the Supreme Court mildly pulled them up during 2019, but there doesn't seem to have been any concrete action. Is there
inaction? Is there political interference? Let's come down to brass tacks and what the issue really is. Namit Saxena, is there political interference? Can there be political interference? And should we then just nip it in the bud so that there is no chance of it?
See, these are very broad questions which you're asking. Is there any political interference? I don't know. I can't say. Can there be political interference? Again, I can't say there can be. But see, when we talk about an independent mechanism to be brought in, see, these are very subjective terms. What may be independence to you may not be independence to Mr. Hegde or me. So these are very broad terms. Now, again,
No, Mr. Saxena, I'm sorry. It's very clear. Whoever hires you, will you be beholden to them? Let me put it in as simple terms as possible. That's what the court is asking, isn't it?
No. It is not as simple. See, all tribunals for that matter, for example, NCLT, the chairperson, NCLAT, the chairperson, there is, you'll say that political interference is there also. Yeah, but tribunals act against the government of the day. So this is not as simple as we talk about it. See, again, and as the Solicitor General also rightly pointed out today, having CGI, in all discussions is also not, the solution. We have to devise another mechanism which can be, which can solve this problem of interference. I agree that you're right that there should not be any political interference. But again, we are talking about a constitutional body. There has to be a larger consultation on what can be the independent mechanism. Having judiciary in everything is not the solution. So we'll have to evolve another mechanism. So, when you ask me, is there a political interference and can there be political interference? These are very, very broad questions. They can't be answered.
Let me ask Dr. Quraishi then. Who would be in the best position to know whether these things do happen? Dr. Quraishi, all the rest of the panel can only speculate. Opposition can only make charges when things don't go their way. Is there a kernel of truth to these doubts and suspicions? Does the position feel beholden to the government of the day?
Well, there is a possibility that the commissioners particularly, because they are not protected, CEC is protected from removal. Once appointed, he can be removed only by impeachment. So he suddenly becomes independent and bold. The other two feel they are on probation. They are always looking over their shoulders whether they will be promoted or not. And therefore, since all three have equal votes, these two commissioners who consider themselves on probation can overrule an inconvenient CEC 10 times a day and make him dysfunctional. Therefore, we need a systemic protection, and the protection which is available to the CEC from removal should be extended to the ECs as well. And from the elevation to the CEC should be by promotion, by seniority. In the case of the judges of the Supreme Court, the senior most becomes the Chief Justice. Government has no discretion. So that is the kind of system we need in the election to make sure that of its independence.
Mr. Colin Gonsalves, the question over here is, how do you broaden the whole selection process? And the court was very clear to mention that this is an issue that they have been seeing or has been observed over several governments. Do you think it's time for change?
Well, I think the change. Quraishi Saab, go ahead.
Are you asking me?
That question was for Mr. Gonsalves. Yes,
Okay.
for Colin Gonsalves.
Well,
Yes.
I think the time has not only come, but it's very long overdue that an important constitutional post, perhaps one of the most important constitutional posts, has been routinely filled by the central government alone. And the central government's ability to choose people who are or could be favorable to the central government when there's a critical situation as far as elections is concerned is obviously there. I take the point that there might have been people appointed by the central government who turned out to be independent. But what we are talking about here is structural and fundamental reform. That is to say, to cut down the element of bias completely. And one should not be indebted to the central government for being a CEC or an election commissioner. The idea is to broaden the selection process so that perhaps apart from the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, perhaps the Chief Justice of India, and in some other ways, the selection panel is broadened so that the element of bias is overcome and you get the best person, the most unbiased person, and the person who's not malleable or changeable by the central government for the job. And secondly, which is what the Supreme Court has pointed out, you'll choose a person who has his age is such that he will finish the entire term. Because independence also comes with security of tenure. If you know you have a couple of years or 1 year, then you're more indebted and more under the thumb of the central government. But if you know you have your full term to go, and as Mr. Quraishi says, if the protection is given also to the election commissioners, then of course you'll have a pretty good team of election commissioners guiding the destiny of India in terms of its elections. It's the most far-reaching reform. And I do hope that the Supreme Court goes ahead and doesn't compromise on this at all. Congratulate the Supreme Court for what it is doing.
You know, I just want to take a look at what the centre's responses have been so far. One of them was mentioned by Namit Saxena, because the Supreme Court has said, let's get Chief Justice of India on that selection committee to decide who becomes EC and CEC. So the centre says that just the inclusion of the judiciary doesn't mean it's going to be free and fair. They've said that these are long-standing conventions which are being followed. But Karan Verma, let me come to you here. Doesn't it just sound logical that no matter who's in the government, you have the government who has say, let the leader of opposition have say, let the judiciary have say, and widen the pool? Why, should it be only from the bureaucracy? Let's make it more transparent so no one can raise these questions. Imagine how crucial the position of Election Commission is. They are the first protectors of democracy.
Tamanna, I absolutely respect what you're saying, and we also respect recommendations and constructive criticism by the Honorable Supreme Court. But I have to stick my neck out and say that the Election Commission of India is one of the most decorated institutions for which I have a lot of respect. It is one of the institutions that we are very proud of. Look what's happening in the US. They have still not been able to count their votes in the midterm polls. The Election Commission does a fantastic job conducting elections at such a large scale. So that's number one. Yes, the Law Commission in 2015, in their findings, they recommended precisely these 3-4 changes. They also said that there should be a separate secretariat along the lines of the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha to ensure the independence. Bipartisan collegium has been a recommendation of the National Law Commission. It's also been a recommendation from all political corners. It was put forward by L.K. Advani in 2012. It was also seconded by M. Karunanidhi, who was the then Chief Minister. So, yes, I totally agree there should be a bipartisan collegium. But, Tamanna, one thing is very ironical, that Justice Lodha, when he took over as the CJI back in 2014, he pointed out an interesting thing. I mean, when someone points out on another institution, they should also look within. He said that there is an uncle judiciary syndrome that has bitten our judiciary, where 1/3 of the judges are all uncles and aunts of each other. And it's time we also look within. The Supreme Court, with due respect, they also need to look within how their selection process can be more transparent. It's easy to preach and we respect that.
No,
I'm not saying it's a tit for tat. I'm just raising a question. I'll just complete. Give me 10 seconds more. I'm not saying it's a tit for tat. All I'm saying is we are all for suggestions to strengthen Election Commission as an institution, but the Supreme Court, who's preaching this, they should also look within. They scuttled all efforts for the NJAC, the National Judicial Commission, when it came in 2014. There also exists a club system, a collegium system, where judges keep appointing each other.
Let's have transparency. I'll let Sanjay Hegde feel that. Let's have transparency in all forms. Let's have transparency in all forms, one by one.
Well, the judiciary doesn't conduct elections. And, if you have your own election commissioner, it's like having your own umpire in a game of cricket. So it's about as simple as that. And this kind of whataboutery doesn't get you anywhere. Yes, among the judges and the lawyers, there have been many relations, but the legal tradition runs the same way that the tradition of doctors, tradition of journalists, and everything runs. So there have been bureaucratic families. There have been families with regard to the army as well. That is not the question. The question is, how do you get honest umpiring of elections? And that is the question that the court is asking. Can we see to it that there is a much broader consensus? It's like saying, the majority of cricket in the world is being played by Indians. So Indians get to appoint all umpires in all games which involves them.
Okay, 1 minute. Karan, but if you keep the whataboutery away, if you keep the whataboutery aside, if you come to the issue at hand, you need to expand the selection process, isn't it?
Tamanna, absolutely, I never denied that. My first statement was that
why is the central government? So then, why is the central government in court saying the process is fine?
Bipartisan collegium. No, I don't agree with that. I believe such reforms are welcome. I welcome what the Supreme Court has said, but I also say that the Supreme Court, Justice Lodha flagged it, the uncle jury syndrome. They also need to look within and strengthen their process also. As important an institution as Election Commission is, so is the judiciary. They also need to look within. That's a point I'm raising.
All right. So which is a whataboutery? What about the judiciary? It is right now the case in court is about the selection process of election commissioners and CEC. Namit Saxena, let me come to you. The simple question is that the central government right now in court has an opportunity to change things, to bring real reform. They should be welcoming and accepting of these 2015 recommendations, let the leader of opposition also come into the process, let Chief Justice of India come into process, bring other, maybe people who would be independent, broaden the base, and don't make it like a selection process, which is possibly questioned. They should be welcoming it in court.
In all cases, see, having the leader of opposition, having the judiciary, and having the central government, this mixture is not, a foolproof independence, the tool to get independence. This is not a formula. You have to, we have to look out of the box and think, is it actually, in all, so we have a selection committee, in the country that LOP will sit and parliament, the central government nominees will sit. Nominees on the judiciary will sit, and this will be the selection committee for all selections in the country. It can't be like this. We have to think out of the box.
Why not? What is the out of the box idea? It's better. It's better than only one side having a say, right?
Like you pointed out, there was a chief election commissioner who was only for 4 months. The previous CJI was only there for a few days, for 74 days, and we had Chief Justice K.N. Singh, who was even lesser tenure. So having a lesser tenure is not an indication of having unindependent commission or unindependent constitutional functionaries. So this is not the criteria we're looking for. Also, we have to see what is the court looking for. The court has to give a mandamus. So when you are looking for a mandamus to give in a case of a nature like this, you have to, look at something broader. It can't be that you inject judiciary and everything, and everything becomes independent all of a sudden. This is not.
No, that's a suggestion. That's a suggestion that is being made. That is a suggestion. Let me bring in Dr. Quraishi over here, if I still have him with us. Dr. Quraishi, the suggestion is bring in the judiciary. Namit Saxena is saying, the central government in court is saying just inserting the judiciary everywhere doesn't mean it's going to be free and fair. But do you think that this is the best possible formula as of now for checks and balances? That you don't leave it just to the government of the day to decide who becomes election commissioner, who becomes chief election commissioner?
Actually, more than the judiciary, we need the wider consultation with the political parties, which is why leader of opposition, the presence of leader of opposition in the collegium is much more important than of the Chief Justice of India. But at the same time, since this 3-member collegium we are familiar with, it is already working for CVC, CIC, the Director CBI, so therefore maybe the same can be extended to the Election Commission. Now, Tamanna, I would also like to mention about the truncated tenure of the CEC. I think Supreme Court has not fully understood it yet because it is just the beginning of the hearing. Now, this was bound to happen. Till the 93, there used to be one-man commission, the CEC. So once appointed, and his tenure was 6 years, so he will complete his 6 years. Now we are first appointed as the election commissioners. We complete 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, then we become CEC. Together it becomes 5 to 6 years. So therefore we have to still look at the combined term, and it can never be 6 year full term for the CEC anymore after the multi-member commission was introduced in 1993. Yes. And thirdly, if I may also complete another thing, that why is only bureaucracy appointed to conduct the election of the CEC? Who else? Who else has the experience? Who else has the experience? We have conducted elections all our lives. I was a presiding officer of a single booth. I was a returning officer in many elections. I was observer in many elections. Bring somebody else with that kind of experience and make him the CEC.
Okay, so two fair points, two very important bits of insight coming from Dr. Quraishi. That the short tenure doesn't mean that the CEC doesn't have, any independence. That's a process. That's an outcome of the system. The bureaucracy is a good hunting ground for election commissioners and chief election commissioners because they come with decades of experience. Now, the question of including a wider consultation process as far as political parties are concerned. Colin Gonsalves, is that really where the trick lies? And why just the LOP? Bring in more political parties so that tomorrow, it's the political parties who are complaining the most, isn't it? Whenever there is a decision that they perceive is not in their favor. Tomorrow, they can't say this person is acting on behest of the government of the day because they have skin in the game?
Well, there are lesser chances if the leader of the opposition is there, as Dr. Quraishi pointed out, and if the consultation process is really broad-based and pervasive, then there is a less of a chance. No system is absolutely foolproof, but this is as foolproof a system as you will get. And I want to add that in today's circumstances, but particularly with this government at the center, which has tremendous energy to pack all positions in this country, high or low, with people affiliated to the BJP or its ally, it's so pervasive and it's so, in a sense, upsetting to see how people are being appointed in this country without caring for talent, rather looking for alliance with the main party at the center. It is very important today that the Supreme Court has taken up this issue, and it is the most important thing for democracy that the CEC is finally broken from its chain to the central government, and a broad-based panel is set up that could possibly differ from the central government while selecting people. It's the single most important democratic step that India can take today for the central government and its ambition to fill every single post in this country with people affiliated to the BJP.
Namit Saxena, would you like to respond to that? Colin Gonsalves's allegation, his claim that more than ever, it's important right now to bring in a balance.
It's never too late is what I can say. The sooner the better. You know, the election commission has to be fair to conduct fair elections in the country. There is no doubt on that. And whenever, you know, this is a petition of 2015 now being heard in 2022. So, you know, the sooner the better.
Yeah. All right. We'll be tracking this case very carefully. It's an important one. And, you know, the fact is that it's great to hear the observations, read the headlines. We've had a superb discussion here. At the end of the day, will there really be change? That's the big question mark. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us.